All right, let's begin with epithelial tissue. And so this is what is going to line every body surface and all of our body cavities. And our organs are going to be lined on the outside and the inside by epithelial tissue. Let's take a look here. What we have is the small intestine. Here we have the inside of the small intestine, and so this is going to be formed by epithelial tissue here. Okay, and then also what you can't see is on the outside, which would be around here, this would also have lining of epithelial tissue. Also, a lot of our different glands are going to be derived then from this epithelial tissue, and unlike connective tissue, here we'll have little or no extracellular matrix. So this will make more sense when we talk about connective tissue. So let's cover the 6 characteristics of epithelial tissue. First one is going to be cellularity. So what we see here is going to be made up mostly of cells, and these cells are going to be held together by different types of intracellular junctions that we can't see, but they are going to span the entire membrane of the cell so that they can communicate with one another, okay? And here what we see too is a little extracellular matrix because we have a lot of cells that make up the epithelial tissue. Okay, next thing is polarity. So these are going to have a top or apical surface and a bottom or basal surface. So the top is going to be where the cells are going to migrate, and then here at the bottom, the basal surface, what we have is that it will be attached to this basement membrane, which is going to be made up of connective tissue. And next, what we have is innervation. And so epithelial tissue has a rich system of nerve endings, receptors that are all going to detect changes in the body or the organ region due to the environment and sense. So think about your skin. This is going to be mostly composed of epithelial tissue, and we have a lot of receptors so that we can detect like pressure, touch, heat, for example. All right, also epithelial tissue have a high regeneration capacity, and this is because they are dying off or damaged quickly. Again, because most of these are going to be exposed to different environments or to different surfaces. And so they basically are going to be replenished as fast as they are dying off. For instance, our skin replenishes itself every 2 weeks, okay? Next, what we have is the attachment. And so the basal surface, again here, or the bottom layer, is going to be attached to a thin basement membrane. And this basement membrane is going to be produced by both the epithelial tissue and the connective tissue below it. Okay, so it's a very thin layer again. And so here we're going to always have epithelial being connected in or close proximity to connective tissue. All right, lastly, these are going to be avascular. This means that they lack blood vessels, and so these are going to receive nutrients by diffusion. And so this is going to come up from the connective tissue through the basement membrane, but also have diffusion here at the lateral surfaces. Go back to terms of anatomy, lateral to the sides, okay? So that we can have molecules that are going to be transported rapidly through all those cells. Okay, so functions, kind of a boring slide, but we need to get through it. All right, so we have physical protection. This is going to be from dehydration, abrasions, but also from like physical damage, chemical damage, and different biological agents, like for example, that we find within our environment, like if you're if an area is being sprayed for like pesticides, say for like mosquitoes, well, this is going to be your skin, for example, is going to be your first line of defense. Okay, another thing, selectively permeable. And so this means that there's a regulation of passage of materials. So think of it like the plasma membrane. It's going to regulate what's coming in and what's coming out. Pretty much it's going to be a semi-permeable membrane too. So it's going to allow some things in, but it will really keep a lot of things out. All right, secretion. So these epithelial cells have different exocrine cells that produce these secretions like sweat and oil. So we find this like within our skin. And so sometimes we get ducts that are going to be plugged. And this is like where acne comes in. Also within our hair follicles, we have sebum that's produced to help make it nice and shiny and not brittle. Also, last but not least, sensation. So again, think of your skin, highly composed of epithelia. And so here we'll have a lot of nerve endings. So we're going to be paying attention now to different touch pressures, mechanical stressors, and also different heat. But also we have help to detect light and taste and sound and smell and hearing. So you can think, okay, hearing will have epithelial within our ear, smell within our nose, sound also within our ear, taste on our tongue, and then light so around our eye. In order to classify epithelial tissue, we have to look at two different criteria. All right, first we talk about the number of layers of cells. The second is to look at the shape of the cell. So there's three different layers. So we have simple, which equals one layer, stratified equals two or more, and pseudo-stratified means that it equals one true layer. However, it looks like there's multiple based on the nuclei arrangement. Okay, next what we have is the shape of the cells. And so what we have is squamous, so this is going to be a very flat one. Cuboidal, as you can imagine, is going to look like a cube about the same width as height. Columnar shape is going to be taller than they are wide. And then lastly, transitional, these are going to have this like ice cream scoop appearance to it. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about this now. So again, now we're looking at layers. So with the first one, with simple epithelium, simple equals a single layer of cells where the cells have an apical surface and then are attached to the basement membrane. And so the side that they're attached to this basement membrane is going to be the basal or the bottom surface, okay? Below the basement membrane then, what we have is connective tissue. And so the way that our epithelial cells are going to move is towards the top, towards the apical surface, so that when they die off, they're sloughed off and then they're growing up towards the apical surface. Okay, next what we have is the stratified epithelium, and so this is going to be two or more layers of cells. And so not all of these cells have an apical surface or are not going to be attached to a basement membrane. Only the layer that is closest to the basement membrane will have the basal surface, the bottom layer, okay? And only here at the top we have the true apical surface. However, direction is going to continue where we'll slough off these cells at the apical surface and these cells are going to keep migrating. Okay, now I just want you to point out too, both have a lateral surface because lateral sides have more of these epithelial cells touching them. Okay, so last what we have here is going to be the pseudostratified. And so the cell nuclei have the appearance of multiple layers, however, they're all attached to one basement membrane. Okay, so not all of these then are going to reach the apical surface. All right, so one other classification that we have is by their shape of epithelia. All right, so let's start with the first one. So here we're looking at squamous cells. And squamous has this flat, wide, and somewhat irregular shape, so kind of looks like a flat egg. Okay, the nucleus is going to resemble here like the yolk of an egg, and then here's the white part of the egg. Okay. Next shape is the cuboidal, and so this is basically going to look like a cube, and so about equally wide as it is tall, and then nucleus tends to be right in the center of the cell. Third one here, we have the columnar, and so this is going to be taller than it is wide, and it's going to have like this long oval nucleus to it. All right, this last one right here, I'm going to write it in, so this is transitional. And so this one is pretty cool because this kind of has the appearance of ice cream scoops. And we find this only a couple places in the body because it helps with stretching. So we'll find this like within the urinary bladder and also within the uterus. So here, let's talk about examples. So first one, let's talk about simple squamous epithelium. So look first here, we see simple. This is referring to the layer, squamous referring to the shape. All right, so this one's going to be one layer of flat cells. Okay, function here is for rapid diffusion. So we're going to find this like within the lungs so that we have exchange of oxygen, carbon dioxide. Also, we'll find this within the blood capillaries where it will exchange oxygen and waste products. So here we have the example, our simple squamous epithelium. All right, with this next example, simple cuboidal epithelium, so simple one layer, cuboidal, cuboid in shape. So here we have that these cells are going to be as tall as they are wide, and so here we only have one of them, right? One layer. All right, so here function is for absorption and secretion, so we find this within the kidneys primarily. Also, we'll find this in some exocrine glands, and then also within the surface of the ovaries, so absorption and secretion of different molecules. All right, so this is going to be a unique example, okay? With columnar cells, what we also have to add is if it's ciliated or non-ciliated. And so non-ciliated means it doesn't have cilia, ciliated means that there is cilia at the apical surface. Here, in non-ciliated, simple columnar epithelium, here we have one layer of cells that are taller than they are wide and they don't have cilia. Examples found within the small intestine, and here would be our basement membrane. Here is an example of one layer of those columnar cells, and these do not have cilia. They do have microvilli, but that's not the same thing as cilia. All right, so the other example, now we have ciliated simple columnar epithelium. So now these have cilia and are going to be single layer with a columnar shape, so taller than they are wide. Here in this example, what we find then on this image, and I'm circling, these would be the cilia. You can tell because they look like finger-like projections and are found at the apical end of the epithelia. And we find this in a few spots, so the uterine tube and also within the respiratory tract, allowing for stuff to move about. All right, so here we have the stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified, we have more than two layers. Squamous means that they are flat and wide. And how we name stratified squamous epithelium, like for the skin, is the appearance that it is at the apical layer, so again at the top. The basement membrane, though, the cells closest there, might have the appearance of being cuboidal. However, know though that the way that we name this type of epithelium is based on this apical layer, okay? Stratified cuboidal now, we have stratified multiple layers of cuboid cells as tall as they are wide. Purpose of this is for protection and secretion, so we find this a lot within our ducts and our glands, and so helps with making sure that these glands are going to be protected. Very rare example in the body is this stratified columnar epithelium. So the function of this is for protection and for secretion. The male urethra is one example where we find this, but also we find this in some exocrine glands. So stratified multiple layers, columnar meaning that they are taller than they are wide. So here we have multiple layers, and unlike pseudostratified, there are distinct layers that have, or where the cells stem from. Pseudostratified columnar epithelium, typically we'll only find pseudostratified that goes with columnar. All right, so again, this will have appearance that looks like there are multiple layers. However, there's only one single layer, so the pseudostratified, and then columnar meaning that they are going to be taller than they are wide. And so for this example, here we have some nuclei, so some are smaller, but then here we have some tall columnar epithelial cells. All right, so what do we see here? This is cilia, and so this we would find in the nasal cavity, helps move things along. All right, here we now have the transitional epithelium, and so here at the apical surface, the cell is going to change its shape. And let's draw in. On this image, here would be your apical surface, and then here would be your basement membrane. This is going to have the appearance, again, of like ice cream scoops that we'll find scattered throughout, and so purpose of it is to help with stretching. The urinary bladder, very important, that's the function, so we'll find transitional epithelia here. All right, and lastly, let's talk about glands. These are going to be individual cells or multicellular organs that are going to perform some type of function that has secretion of different molecules. And so some secretions might be like mucin, hormones, enzymes, and different waste products. And so there's two different categories. We have the endocrine gland and exocrine gland. All right, endocrine gland, these do not have ducts and secrete directly into the blood. whereas exocrine glands have ducts and they secrete products into these ducts. So here's an example of an exocrine gland, and these are going to be made by epithelial cells, okay? And so these are going to be invaginations that are formed, and then they will have secrete their different molecules that they'll send into these ducts and then go into the rest of the body.